that aquifer is fairly well mapped out, you can no longer drill through there. That's the binding nature that the ERCB would no longer be able to say, well, no, we can just approve this permit. They would have to respect what's in the plan. Fact, Bill 10 amendments give strength to local decision making. Section 7, repealing Section 9(2)(f). No area structure plans will be made as part of a regional plan. Area structure plans remain an exclusive municipal responsibility. Just strengthening that. Section 8 amends Section 11(c)(3). Existing municipal development permits will be grandfathered, left in place, so there's no threat to what the local permits that are out there. They stay intact. They're not to be changed through the Alberta Land Stewardship Act and the regional plan. Yep.
Go to myth number 3. The Section 13 and Section 15 of the Land Stewardship Act have been interpreted to somehow suggest that they block off access to the courts for judicial appeals. This is, again, a fairly selective misinterpretation of what Sections 13 and 15 do. Sections 13 state very clearly that the content of the regional plans are public policy, not judicial rights, and the responsibility of the elected government of Alberta. Section 15 states that it does not create neither the Land Stewardship Act nor the regional plan create any new jurisdiction for the courts. Somehow that's been interpreted as denying jurisdiction to either challenge the act for its legality or all the other appeals that arise under land use decisions. This simply isn't the case. If you look carefully, all of the existing appeals, if you go to the next, all existing appeals remain in place, both for Court of Queen's Bench and Court of Appeal, off of all of the regulatory boards such as Surface Rights Board and Land Compensation Boards. No appeal provisions are removed, and court jurisdiction remains unchanged. As I think others have pointed out, any attempt to block access to the courts on the legality of a plan would actually contravene the principle of the rule of law and be unconstitutional. So even if the government tried to do that, you couldn't. It's fairly easy to explain what Section 13 is about. It's about if there's an issue of non-compliance, if the regional plan says such and such must happen, who decides whether the municipality or a private landowner or a company is complying with that regional plan? Is it the government, or can it be a third party, such as the Sierra Club or Friends of the Earth or that type of group? And I'll give you the perfect example, and one that I think a lot of you can recognize with, that's happened down south of the border, where they haven't had this kind of provision, and environmental policy has fallen into the hands of the courts. Most of you remember the story, kind of a nice story for Alberta, of the 25 wolves that we sent down to Yellowstone Park in 1995 because they didn't have any wolves left in the park and they wanted wolves. So they got some good Beer Isle Alberta wolves. So the target was to build up the park population of wolves to 350. Well, today, friends, the population of wolves in the greater Yellowstone area is 17,050. Okay? 17,500. Excuse me, that sounds good. 1,700. They weren't on Viagra. But the target was 350. They got 1,700 now, and you know what wolves do when they get crowded. They spread out. So, of course, they're off now into Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, helping themselves to cattle when they feel like it, and also in Montana where there's a fairly active elk farming activity. They're knocking off a lot of elk too. So what did the local governments do? They responded to the concerns of the local people, and they brought in a managed wolf call, not open season on wolves, but a managed targeted wolf call, where when there were clear evidence of wolves predating livestock, in the case of Montana the elk, there was a way to go in and call the wolves and push them back. What happened there? Oh, you can guess. Sierra Club, Friends of the Earth, right into a federal court, and got an injunction against all 3 states from having these limited wolf calls. That was actually back before Christmas. I noticed just the other day there was a compromise agreement reached between a couple of the groups plus the governments, and for a limited version of this, federal court judge said again that won't do. So that's an example of where enforcement of environmental policy and land use falls into the courts. You get judges making policy decisions, no accountability back to the people at the local level. It's not what we want in Alberta, and under the Land Stewardship Act we won't have it. Really quickly, there are a couple of other administrative appeals added now. We go to the next one there. Yeah. This is not legal, this is internal administrative appeal. A person who is directly and adversely affected under a regional plan may request a review or amendment. If there is a request, the stewardship minister must create a panel to review the request, and the panel's decision must be made public. That's new under one of the amendments in Bill 10. And similarly, under Bill 10, one more avenue of appeal. We go to the next slide. Yep. For variances, again, these recognizing that government policy is imprecise and that there's some boundaries being drawn perhaps on conservation regions and so forth. It may be that somebody has a piece of property that's right on a boundary and the landowner says, well, I would be better off if I was inside the boundary or outside the boundary. This new provision allows that landowner to go to the minister and say, I'd like a variance, which is a legal term for exception, to be either moved inside or outside. And the minister has the discretion to grant that as long as it doesn't defeat the overall purpose. So again, it's a safeguard against unintended consequences. And again, most of you know that governments make decisions with a lot of unintended consequences. This is another one of the built-in safeguards. Thank you.
Myth 4, compensation removed. It's a misinterpretation of Section 19. The Section 19 that was in the original Act said, the short version of it was no right to compensation under this Act, under a regional plan or anything done under a regional plan, except either as provided by Section 3, Division 3, which was a conservation directive, or as provided under any other enactment, another enactment. So the limitation on the explanation and limitation of compensation, actually a conservation directive is something new. Right now everyone in rural Alberta is under rural zoning, which is probably rural general or agriculture. So there's no compensation that you're under that zone. You can apply for rezoning and move into a different zone if granted by the local municipality. But one way or another, if there was an area structure plan done around a local lake and you fell outside that boundary, you weren't compensated. If you fell inside, you weren't compensated. That's just the way zoning has worked across North America. What we've said is if there's something in a regional plan that affects a piece of private property, there has to be a way to compensate that individual that may be affected. If he's directly affected through a conservation directive, we have to be able to compensate. So sections 36 through 42 in the Act deal directly with the compensation under Section 19. But to clarify, because it was being mixed up and misinterpreted, so we've cleaned it up in the next line. Fact, existing compensation continues, the new wording of Section 19. A person has the right to compensation payable for the taking of the property interest as provided for in other sections of Alberta Land Stewardship Act, example, the conservation directives, as provided for in other statutes of Alberta, example, the Expropriation Act, the Water Act, the Public Lands Act, the Forestry Act, the Mines and Minerals Act, or as provided at common law. The new wording makes this explicit, what was implied in the original wording. So all existing provisions for any compensation in all the other statutes that include compensation are still available, but the conservation directive is the new piece in there. And this does not cancel anyone's right to compensation. It's actually enabling compensation if you were, in the rarest case, affected by a conservation directive. So, we'll just clarify that one. The next fact, Bill 10 creates a new streamlined process for compensation, just to clean this up even further. So it says in there, a landowner who suffers a compensable taking may apply to the Crown for compensation. Compensable taking is defined as any negative impact on a property right, title, or interest giving rise to compensation in law or equity. If the landowner is not satisfied with the Crown's response, he has the right to go to the Land Compensation Board or a Court of Queen's Bench. So that's the amendments to Section